Welcome to A Memory of Malice. I'm your host, Lee Nix. We're returning to Canada in this episode, where we cover the disappearance of Maddy Scott. This is a user-requested case, courtesy of YouTube user Annette Melnichuk. If you would like to make a request, you can contact me through any of my social media. Leave me a YouTube comment or email me at amemoryofmalice@gmail.com. I have a notebook and I'm writing them all down so I don't forget. I think the only warning for this case is a brief mention of suicide. With the intro out of the way, let's get into the case. The town of Vanderhoof lies almost directly in the center of British Columbia, Canada. It's a rural area. The number one industries are logging and agriculture. And it's a small town. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. Madison Geraldine Scott, better known as Maddie, had lived her entire life in Vanderhoof. She'd spent that life horseback riding, dirt biking, playing hockey, and more. Maddie loved playing sports and being outdoors. She just loved to be active. You could call Maddie a tomboy, but I think that term is a little one-dimensional. Maddie liked what she liked. She'd wear dresses and makeup when she wanted to, but then she'd be wearing coveralls and changing the oil in her truck. Maddie had wide and varied interests and likes. Maddie's family is a close unit. Her mother and father are Don and Eldon Scott, and Maddie has an older brother, Ben, and a younger sister, Georgia. Maddie and Georgia look so much alike. Considering what happens, it must be so bittersweet for her. Dawn told how Maddie wasn't always interested in academics, but she liked the social parts of school. Maddie especially liked her visual arts class at Nechako Valley Secondary School. She would write and star in amateur films with her friends. She was a talented writer and a natural leader in these endeavors. In an ominous coincidence, Maddie and her friends made a horror/suspense film called The Stalker. Maddie played stalking victim in that film. I couldn't find the film online, but there are some clips in the 48 Hours documentary that talks about this case. On one hand, it's a coincidence, but on the other, it's obviously irrelevant. I know if I went missing or was murdered, people would use these episodes and my love of horror to do the same thing to me. It's gotta be frustrating when such a silly detail warrants a mention in a 48 Hours episode, when they could have used that runtime on literally any other detail that might have been helpful. Maddie graduated from high school and went to work with her father as an apprentice heavy-duty mechanic at MBG Logging. Heavy-duty machines include things like excavators, forklifts, tractors, and trenchers, for example. So she'd fix up and maintain the really big construction-type equipment. There are photos of her in a mechanic's jumpsuit, covered in motor oil, with the biggest grin on her face, and she looks radiant. She has many friends, and they only have good things to say about her. Maddie is a bright, giving spirit, the kind of girl who'd give you the shirt off her back. She's also carefree, and maybe a bit impulsive. This blithe spirit would lead to an enduring mystery. It was Friday, May 27, 2011. And Maddie originally had plans with her cousin Cora Kelly. The pair were close, and, as Kelly would only be in Vanderhoof a short while, they intended to spend some time together. But Maddie changed her mind. Every year, a local man named Garrett Christensen would hold a birthday party at Hogsback Lake. This wasn't a balloon and cake type of party. Think booze and music. Maddie decided she wanted to go. Hogsback Lake is about 23 kilometers, or about 14 miles, from Vanderhoof, and it's actually one of the smaller bodies of water in the surroundings, at only 128 acres. Not only is it small in area, but it's only about 22 feet at its deepest point. However, it's a known party spot, and hundreds of people have been known to show up to events. Maddie decided to cancel her plans with Cora and attend the birthday party with her friend, Jordan Jordy Bolduc. The pair planned to camp out at the lake to drink and party without worrying about driving home drunk. Jordy and Maddie weren't super close. They'd been friends in high school, but Maddie's mother, Dawn, doesn't think they'd hung out after graduation. I'm not sure how they made this plan together, but I'm guessing it just came about because they both wanted to go to the party and didn't want to be alone. The girls took Maddie's 1990 off-white Ford pickup out to the Hogsback Lake, sometime around 8 o'clock that Friday night. The party had just begun, and the pair arrived in time to help collect firewood for the bonfire. The group was small at this point, just friends of friends. Maddie didn't know very many people there, but Jordy knew most of them. After they helped with the fire, the girls started to set up the tent, but quickly realized that something was amiss. Maddie had accidentally grabbed the wrong tent. She'd meant to bring the 2-person tent, and she'd brought a little pup tent instead, which wouldn't suffice for the 2 of them. She'd also forgotten the tent poles. So a quick trip home had to be made. Maddie switched out the tents and grabbed the poles, and had a quick chat with her mother before returning to the lake. Here's where things start to get a little odd. When Maddie got to Hogsback, she put up the tent, went inside, and stayed there all night. It makes no sense, but Maddie didn't party at all that night. While Maddie was in the tent, Jordy was outside partying. In her own words, she was super drunk. The party began to swell in size, and people that Jordy wasn't familiar with began to show up. The party had been advertised as a Facebook event, and around 50 people would come to the party at the lake. At around midnight, a fight broke out between some partiers, and Jordy was caught in the crossfire. She got pushed into the fire, or bounced into it, as she puts it. No matter how drunk she was, that caused her some damage, and she decided that she should head home. Jordy's boyfriend actually had to physically carry her, but she stopped to talk to Maddie and ask her to come with them. Maddie refused, but begged Jordy to stay. Jordy, in pain and very drunk, said she just wanted to go home. As the night wore on, people began to stream out of the campsite. Several groups would stop and ask Maddie if she wanted to ride back into town with them, but she refused every time. She didn't want anyone to steal her things. The party host, Garrett Christensen, had originally intended to camp out that night as well, but he had an argument with his girlfriend. He left, and after about 3 a.m., no one is left at the campsite besides Maddie. There are more campsites at Hogsback Lake, 10 campsites in all. But Madison was the only person at that particular site in the early morning hours of Saturday, May 28th. And sometime during those early morning hours, she completely disappeared. Jordy returned the next morning to get the things she had left behind. There's some confusion in my sources as to exactly when this happened. Some say 8 a.m., but Jordy says 10 a.m. in the 48 Hours episode. Whatever the time was, Dawn says Jordy was just dropping by before she went to work. Jordy arrived to find the tent unzipped and empty. Maddie's things were still in the tent, pushed to one side. It didn't look like anything strange had occurred. Maddie just wasn't in the tent, so Jordy grabbed her things and left. During that Saturday, Maddie's friends and family tried to contact her, but they had no luck. Cell service is spotty in the lake area, so it was possible that Maddie didn't have service. No one was worried yet. Back at Hogsback Lake, Christensen returned to clean up after his party. He says he saw Maddie's tent, but that it was zipped closed, and he assumed she was asleep. He didn't want to wake her, so he didn't try to talk to her. I wonder whether Jordy zipped the tent while she was there, or whether someone else had done so. However, we can't find out without asking Jordy, but that's not possible. But I'll talk about that a little later. Saturday evening, another party was held, and this one was 3 times as big as the first, with around 150 people in attendance. Maddie's little sister, Georgia, actually went to this party, and saw her sister's truck and possessions. Georgia was initially afraid to tell anyone this information because she didn't want to get in trouble for drinking. Someone at that party Saturday flattened Maddie's tent, either as a prank or just to get it out of the way. I can only go by photographs, but it seems to have been neatly done. It didn't look smashed or wadded. It doesn't look like it was done as a prank. Sunday morning dawned and slid into a sunny afternoon, and no one had heard from Maddie. At this point, Eldon and Dawn Scott felt like something must be wrong. When Dawn called Jordy's mother and learned that she'd returned on Saturday, she started to panic. She and her husband immediately made the drive out to Hogsback to try and find Maddie. When they arrived at the campsite, they found a plethora of troubling signs. Maddie's tent was still collapsed where the partiers had left it. Her truck was parked in the same spot it had been all weekend, with a pair of expensive motorbike boots still in the truck bed. Dawn and Eldon unlocked the truck with a spare key, and inside they found Maddie's purse and her beloved camera. Immediately, they knew she'd never have left them behind. Dawn called the RCMP. In startling contrast to the other Canadian disappearance that I've covered on this channel, that of Amber Tuckero, the RCMP quickly got to work investigating Maddie's disappearance. They began investigating the scene and organizing searches with family and volunteers immediately. The scene was concerning. If Maddie had left, why had she left all of her things behind? Especially when she'd been so reluctant to leave them the night of the party. An incomplete list of items left behind at the campsite includes her truck, her camping gear, a cooler with wine and beer still in it, her motorbike boots, her camera, and some jewelry. According to both Dawn and Jordy was the one who had found Maddie's jewelry. I'm not quite sure where this happened in the timeline. I assume it was after the RCMP was called and began their investigation. But then, why wasn't the area cordoned off? Perhaps because they weren't considering it a crime then. Either way, how the jewelry was found is a bit fuzzy in my mind, but we can be fairly certain that Jordy did find it. Jordy found it in the area of the tent and immediately believed that the jewelry was a bad sign. She didn't think Maddie would have left her jewelry behind like that. Dawn disagrees, saying that Maddie was always very careless with them, and she'd find rings and things all over the house. I tend to agree, given that they were found right below the tent's zip closure. Maddie might have left them in the tent, and they could have just fallen out when the tent was flattened. Maddie had only taken her iPhone 4 and a lanyard with a bunch of keys on it with her. The keys included her car key, so she'd taken the key but not the truck. The iPhone 4 was new, with a robin's egg blue case on it. The whole community came together to search for Maddie. They were doing ground searches, air searches, water searches. They searched on horseback, in helicopters, on quads. Hogsback Lake is surrounded by a huge forest with warrens of disused and unmarked roads, and searchers tracked them down and searched them one by one. Hogsback Lake itself was thoroughly scanned with side-scanning radar. Nothing was found. The more time that passed, and the more area covered with no trace of Maddie, made it clear to the RCMP that they were likely dealing with foul play. If Maddie had gone somewhere on foot and had an accident, she couldn't have made it far. If an animal had attacked her, there would have been signs like blood or tracks, but none were found. It was extremely unlikely that Maddie had left of her own accord. She was very close with her family, and she always kept in contact. If she was unhappy in life, she never showed any signs. She lived in her parents' home and worked with her dad. Maddie's ties to her family ran really deep. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months into years. But no trace of Maddie has been found, despite her family's diligent efforts. So, what could have happened to her? Let's get into it. The first thing I want to focus on in this case isn't really a theory, but I think it's important to talk about before getting too far. I want to discuss the proximity of Highway 16, aka the Highway of Tears, to Vanderhoof and Hogsback Lake. I'm walking a bit of a tightrope here, because I want to be sympathetic to the family's feelings. Still, I also don't want to leave out potentially relevant details. So I need to clarify that the Scott family opposes Madison's inclusion in Highway of Tears cases. But I feel like geography alone supports at least including the information as a possibility. If you aren't familiar with the term, the Highway of Tears refers to a stretch of highway in Canada, from Prince George to Prince Rupert, British Columbia, where a large number of disappearances and homicides have occurred. The exact number of incidences varies, with official numbers in the teens, but locals have told of as many as 30 or 40. If you listened to my episode on Tracy Onawa Jones, you're probably familiar with the evils that lurk on highways. Predators just passing through look for vulnerable people to prey on and disappear along the road, making it very hard to catch them. Highway 16 takes this formula and dials it up to 11, making it a good friend to evil, as journalist Bob Friel said. One major issue is how secluded it is. It winds, rises, and falls through extremely isolated rural and wilderness areas. British Columbia is known for its logging industry, and the area has an abundance of trees that can provide cover for any number of activities. Dotted along the highway are several impoverished communities. Poverty disproportionately affects Indigenous folks, with a staggering 25% of Canada's Indigenous and Métis population the victim of poverty. Many individuals don't have access to a car and are forced to hitchhike to travel. Those who would prey on the vulnerable along the highway are well aware of this desperation. Thus, many victims of the Highway of Tears are hitchhikers, and the vast majority are Indigenous. There are many signs along the highway warning people away from hitchhiking, but that's a fairly useless gesture. If you don't provide people with an alternative means of travel, what the hell are they supposed to do when they need to go somewhere? It unfairly puts the onus on innocent people just trying to survive. I find that the most infuriating thing about Highway of Tears cases. There's this almost chiding tone from people towards the victims. And people incorrectly assume that only hitchhikers are victims of these cases, when they're not. There are a few cases of people who just disappeared near the highway. That's the thing. Highway of Tears cases are really just a geographical grouping. No one thinks that the same person is responsible for all of these cases, but it's a way to draw attention to these murders that have clustered in a particular area. A plea for the authorities to do more and address the real, layered issues plaguing these communities. Highway 16 runs straight through Vanderhoof. I think it's extremely likely that whoever was involved in Maddie's disappearance arrived and left by Highway 16. It's my opinion, given that she was taken while extremely vulnerable and close to the highway, that her case should be included. Again, that is opinion. But now that this interlude is concluded, let's move on to some theories. Our first theory features serial killer Israel Keyes. I won't go too in-depth with Keyes, because this episode isn't about him. But he was a killer who lived in Alaska, but would travel all across the US to commit his crimes. There's a theory that Keyes might have killed Maddie. Israel Keyes didn't really have a victim type, but he did victimize young women more than once in his life. Also, British Columbia isn't that far to drive from Alaska, especially given that Keyes would travel quite far to commit his crimes. Keyes did like to attack victims at campsites and other secluded areas. His last victim was a young girl working at a coffee kiosk alone at night, which does bear a certain similarity to Maddie camping alone at Hogsback. While this theory does have merit, it's also unprovable. Israel Keyes died by suicide in 2012, and he took any secrets he was carrying to his grave. Also, it's not like the idea is any more likely than any dozen other serial killers out there, either. Since there's no evidence tying anyone to Maddie, all we can do is guess. Jordy Bolduc thinks that local man Fribbjørn Bjornsson was involved, since she believed he was bad news, and he and Maddie had once been involved. However, he and Maddie hadn't been together for some time, and he was cleared by the police. Coincidentally, 2 days after being cleared by police, Bjornsson disappeared. His head would later be found on the Nakazli Reserve, having been himself the victim of violent crime. The rest of his body was never found. 2 men pled guilty to the murder that left Bjornsson's young child fatherless. I find the next theory both the least believable and the most mean-spirited. People believe that Jordy and her boyfriend Tyler were involved in Maddie's disappearance. This theory springs from the fact that people are disbelieving that Jordy left Maddie behind at Hogsback. But this theory falls apart when you try to theorize what really happened next. Probably one of the reasons police assume a stranger took Maddie is because she was never found in all of the extremely extensive searches of the area that continue to this day. Logically, it's easiest to assume that someone took her with them out of the area. We know that Jordy was at work on Saturday morning and helped with the search for Maddie on Sunday. She didn't have the opportunity to spirit away with her. Both Jordy and Tyler were cleared by the RCMP as suspects. But I want to discuss this judgment against Jordy because I don't think it's fair. Jordy and Maddie were distant friends at best, who joined forces to get drunk and party. Jordy was injured, and she was injured despite people saying she wasn't hurt online. Her boyfriend had to carry her to his truck. Still, she offered Maddie a ride home. When Maddie said no, what was she supposed to do? She was drunk and injured and just wanted to go home, which is a perfectly understandable feeling. I'd understand her staying to protect Maddie if they were best friends, but they weren't. Many people asked Maddie to come home with them that night. All of those people realized how dangerous it could be for her out there alone, but she wanted to stay and protect her things. I'm not blaming Maddie either. She should have been safe doing so. The only person at fault for what happened to Maddie is the monster who took her. I think Jordy is an easy target. She's awkward during interviews, which could be for a lot of reasons, but irresponsible media have trained people to read awkwardness as guilt. So people see her talk in the 48 Hours interview and the documentary on this case, and assume she's hiding something. Body language analysis is largely bullshit, and I will die on this hill. Jordy's sleeping bag, pillow, and pillowcase were taken for analysis. Dawn Scott says Jordy had washed the sleeping bag and that she hadn't done so in years, but analysts still found Jordy's blood from a previous injury years before. So it's safe to assume that Maddie's fresher DNA wasn't on the sleeping bag. Also, this isn't relevant, but how does one bring that up in conversation? Oh, I never wash my sleeping bag, it's just full of my dead skin cells and sweat. Gross. The fact of the matter is that Jordy and Tyler were cleared by the RCMP after being thoroughly investigated and fully cooperating. So this continued focus on her is disheartening at best, especially when there's really no evidence to imply she had anything to do with Maddie's disappearance. All of the suspicion and hostility has made it so Jordy doesn't want to talk to anyone about this case. And I don't blame her. It's a shame, though, because it means that an avenue of communication about the case is shut off. There are definitely odd things about this case, but most of them concern how Maddie behaved that evening. Why did Maddie go to this party only to immediately hide away in her tent all night? What was the point of her going at all? It's really strange to me that she never partied at all that evening. But even then, we don't know that it's relevant to her disappearance. The most believed theory is that some unknown predator came and took Maddie sometime after 3 a.m. and before 10 a.m. on May 28, 2011. She might have been already awake and on her feet, given that her keys and phone are missing as well. So that might put her disappearance closer to late morning, but that's only been theorized. Personally, I don't think Maddie was taken from her campsite. She might have been lured away or walked away from camp of her own volition, but I believe the actual event happened somewhere else. I think this mostly because her phone and keys are gone, and there's no sign of a struggle at the camp. Maddie's family still holds out hope that Maddie is alive somewhere, and thus I don't want to make any hurtful speculations as to what might have happened to her. There have been cases of abductions where the victim was kept alive, so who am I to say that it didn't happen here? Either way, I'm not going to trample on someone's hope. I also ask that any listeners of this episode keep this in mind if they speculate on the case themselves. Maddy Scott was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance, making her 31 at the time of this recording. She was 5'4", or about 165 centimeters in height. She has ginger red hair and green eyes, fair skin, and freckles. She has a tattoo of the outline of a falcon in flight and a nose ring in her left nostril. If you know anything about Maddie's disappearance, you can report it directly to the Vanderhoof RCMP at 250-567-2222. If you would rather leave an anonymous tip, you can call Canadian Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. There's also a website you can leave a tip on, called solvecrime.ca. That's the Maddy Scott case. I feel bad for the Scotts. They've tried so desperately to get Maddie's name out there, but there have not been any real developments for a long time. I hope that they get answers soon. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, share, follow, whatever the appropriate thing is for the platform you're on. If you feel like supporting me monetarily, that would be vastly appreciated. I've said it before, but I work on this podcast full time, so subscribing to Patreon would be a fantastic help. If you can't help that way, just interacting with it helps so much. Every like and share does a lot to help me grow. As always, my links are in the details. I've been at this for a while now, and it's been such a lovely experience thanks to all of you. Thanks for sticking with me while I've been learning. And, as always, stay safe and stay hydrated.